to the Biz Gone Social podcast. We help entrepreneurs navigate how to get known, get customers, and get the edge over their competition. Here is your host, Lorraine Duncan.
So here we are with episode number 42, and I am actually so glad to be here. And my promise to you, as always, is I want to give you a little bit of verbal caffeine that will energize your social media marketing and help you stay social. After all, don't you want to be the business that everyone's talking about? I know I do. And I'm so stoked to have a good friend of mine, colleague, Tom Martin, with me. And he's had an amazing career over his lifetime, a media career spanning from 35 years, 20 years as a producer for a variety of nationally distributed television shows, followed by 15 years in the public relations field. It has provided Tom Martin with a wide range of experience. So I know we're going to learn so much from him today. So without going into everything, I'm going to post it below in the podcast, but he's had a career with CBS News. He's, produced stories for Diane Sawyer and Charles Kuralt and a lot of other various TV shows, NBC Today show, CNN. I mean, he's collaborated with icons such as one of my favorites, Paul McCartney, Steven Spielberg, and so much more. And I'm going to actually put this in the writing of the podcast. But I want to let Tom just tell, first of all, welcome.
Thanks, Lorraine. And it's been nice being with y'all. I guess we're out of time for today, but no, just kidding. That's a nice introduction. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And, I said a little bit about who you are, what you've worked with, but can you tell me, a lot of people, when I say PR, for instance, they look at me all starry-eyed and they don't know what I'm talking about. So can you tell me a little bit more about your business and actually what you do as a PR person?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, no, well, I appreciate the opportunity, Lorraine. It's great to be with you. As Lorraine, I forget if you mentioned, how we're in a business networking group together here in Connecticut, which is really fun. We have a lot of great people in that group. And it's funny, a lot of people in our group, I've been in that group for a number of years, and there's still probably people in our group who really don't fully understand what I do. And that's probably my responsibility. Who else but me is, responsible for that. But basically, earlier you spoke about that feeling of connection, giving people caffeine to feel that connection. And I think that is just a natural desire that, it's almost like, that craving for oxygen, our first breath of air, literally at the beginning of life, the outside world here. And so I think the same sort of thing, people want to be appreciated, the things that they're passionate about, whether it's learning about social media or, learning about chess or basketball, or, if they're passionate about something, they want to share it. They want to invite someone into the tent to share their passion. It's funny, as you know, I'm a big Tony Robbins fan, and Tony Robbins has a line, he speaks about many different areas. And when he talks about relationships, he says, well, a relationship is a place you go to magnify the human experience. You would go to a movie. We've all been to a movie by ourselves, but it's a whole different ballgame, not to mix metaphors, but it's a whole different ballgame when we're there to share the experience with someone else. And especially when it comes to something that we're passionate about, whether it's the work that we do, a book that we've written, a nonprofit that we're involved in and stuff like that, it just feels so good to be heard. Especially in this day and age when people have such fragmented attention spans, I don't hold you personally responsible for that, Lorraine, although social media had something to do with it, I think. But, in this fragmented attention span world, it's so rare when someone's like, I'm going to put down what I'm doing. I really want to hear what you have to say. That is really fascinating. So we all crave that. And PR is just a way of raising somebody's profile so that more people are aware of them, beyond just their friends and family, so to speak. And so that might be in a local newspaper or might be on a podcast like this. I appreciate the opportunity. There's probably people listening to this who I have never met until this moment. And so it's a really wonderful experience to be able to do that.
Yeah. I'm thinking about, it's like to me, it's like, I think it's so important that we have a means and to get our message out. And I feel like that, public relations is just such a great avenue to be able to do that. And, as you know, and of course, for those of you who don't know, Tom also works with a lot of authors. And for some reason, in the last 2 years, I've been in that space. And so the very first thing that comes to my mind when I talk to an author for the first time is like, what are you doing for public relations? Because, I'm going to share some of your stuff on social media and we're going to do some fun things and stuff. But what are you doing to get the message out so you can get an interview with the target audience that you need to be interviewed on? Or you can get that little article or that press release that you need that's written just the right way. So not only do I consider you a public relations person, but I consider you a writer. I consider you, you've worked on such, big venues such as CBS and NBC, CNN, and other outlets that you've worked with. And I'm thinking to myself is, why own your own PR business now? So why I'm asking this question is because I want to, like this for a couple episodes now, I want to highlight business owners. And some of my clients aren't really business owners. Sometimes some of them, they are thinking of it. And I know, and so I'm like, I want to ask you the hard question is, you've been doing now your PR business probably for about 15 years. What made you want to own a business?
Sure. That's an excellent question. It's something I've thought a lot about over the years, obviously. It's funny, I launched, like you said at the beginning of our interview, I did have a 20-year TV news career as a producer, CNN, ABC, CBS, and, odds and ends thrown in there. I love variety in case you can't, if there's any theme to my career, it's a craving for variety. It's like, how is this coherent? I don't understand, But so I love variety. And at that 20-year mark, I was just feeling a little burned out or exhausted by the long hours. At that point, I'd spent 3 years producing stories for Good Morning America and Diane Sawyer and Charlie Gibson there on that great show. And often it meant working with a video editor until 2 or 3 in the morning and then getting in my car. Hopefully I wouldn't fall asleep behind the wheel, drive home an hour and a half to Connecticut to see my kids who were very young at that time. And I just said, as much as I really love this, and and I did get to work with Paul McCartney during my years at Good Morning America. I also helped cover, the 9/11 tragedy. So it was very, very fulfilling and very exciting and very interesting. But those long hours was just really getting to me. So I moved into the PR field. And I spent only about a year or two with a couple large PR firms in New York. And at one point, I happened to be laid off by one of those PR firms. They were going through some growth pains and that kind of thing. And so they just laid off their top level, executives and so on. I happened to be one of them. So I said, well, I've always thought I've been out of work in my TV news days because the show ends or CBS is told, well, you have to lay off 300 people tomorrow. I know you need everybody, but pick 300, lay them off. So I'd certainly been out of work off and on, which I guess was good practice. It is good practice. But when I was laid off from that PR firm, I said, well, I guess this is a sign I'm meant to go into business for myself. And, perhaps you can relate to this, Lorraine, but, Malcolm Gladwell has something called the 10,000 hour rule, where, if you're really passionate about something, the way Bill Gates was compassionate about mainframe computers, when he was a teenager, sneaking out the window of his family home, in Washington State. And so, you put those hours into something you're fascinated by and passionate about. And then you develop skills and abilities. And so I appreciate, the compliment about my writing ability and that, writing is a big part of the work that I do in the PR field. And so you develop confidence and versatility. And so I sometimes think, it's like I have, 5 or 6 quote unquote, job interviews almost every week because I'm always, constant flux of new clients and the project ends and so on. So whereas it used to be, I'd have one job interview every, 3 to 5 years, and then I'm hired. I don't need to think about a quote unquote job interview. You always want to do a good job, but it's not quite the same thing as putting yourself on the line. Like, can I persuade this person? Can I demonstrate my worth, my value, how I can help them? And it is interesting when I moved from TV news. I mean, a lot of people criticize television news and say, well, it's all about ratings. They want to sell commercial time. They want to make money. And that's all true. That, I'm not going to deny that there's any truth to that. But journalists, for the most part, in my experience, really do have a standard of excellence. They want to create an excellent story, an accurate story, serve the public, maybe shine a light on something. But when, I've sort of crossed the line, sometimes journalists like, oh, you're in PR, that means, you'll spin anything. You're a spin master. It's like, I don't really look at it like that. I want to have integrity and honesty in the work that I do now, of course, and in representing my clients. And so I developed my skills being a storyteller, writing scripts, showing up on somebody's doorstep, going into being invited into their life, into their home to learn why they do what they do. And then I sort of carried those same skills onto the other side of the line in the PR field. And I think I'm very good at it. And I love human beings. I love conversation just like this. And so, being in the PR field gives me the opportunity to have conversations with people, all kinds of interesting people all the time.
Yeah. And, I've known you for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years now, or as long as I've been in the BNI group and had, I have witnessed your work. And interestingly enough, you are a connector. You know how to connect. And I think that it's important for our audience to know it's why, it's funny. You've been doing this, you love it, and you can tell. What would be your favorite part of PR?
It's funny. I forget what point you were making a few minutes ago, but I was thinking of a statement by one of my favorite motivational speakers, Jim Rohn, who passed away a few years ago. Jim, R-O-H-N, great speaker, if any of you want to look him up. But he said, he has so many great lines and quotes. And one was like, how tall should a tree grow? A tree grows to flourish as fully as nature allows it to flourish. And human beings should be the same way. If you have a writing ability or, again, maybe that was relating to, why do I enjoy being in business for myself? I enjoy that I don't have a filter on top of me. Like, no, that's a bad story. No, you can't do that. Oh no, that's a stupid idea. It's like, I make a lot of mistakes, no question about it. Trial and error. That's a big part of PR. But I don't have anyone, I serve my clients. I owe them my best and everything, but I don't have any, executive producer or president of the news division or anything above me. And so, that's a big, an important factor. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
no, you did. You actually did. And, it's funny because I see that daily when I interact with you is I always feel like that. You always give your best, and you give your best to people who aren't your clients too. So I just, I really appreciate that about you. One of the things that, as being a business owner, and I can attest to this as much as you can, there's challenges that we have. And I think, for all of those out there that may be considering going into business themselves, or if you are thinking you want variety like Tom, we all do. That's probably why I don't work in the health field as much as I used to before, is because I love variety. And I'm thinking what do you think? I want people to know the truth. What is the biggest, for you, what is the biggest challenge that you see when you're doing your business? And, and how did you overcome it? Right away, there are certain challenges. I remember my first challenge was, I'm supposed to invoice them? Don't they just pay me? But no, things that I didn't do when I worked at Newark Hospital, or things that I didn't do when I, worked for my husband's marketing or whatever. It's like, I have to collect money. So, what would you say your biggest challenge is in your PR business?
Sure. Well, two things come to mind. And, and maybe a third based on what you just said, in fact, because I loved shifting gears, from, did stories about restaurants for the Food Network for 3 years and about jazz musicians for CBS Sunday Morning and about, financial analysts for CNN Financial. It's like, oh my God, what's the coherent thread here? It's all storytelling and, human, focusing on human beings and what they like to do. But other than that, it's like, is there anything in common here? And so I guess I definitely am a bright, shiny objects person, easily distracted. It's sometimes very hard for me to focus. And so I've learned, you talk about invoicing and everything. So I've learned, for me, systems and processes really help me. And I'm sort of coming to that later in life. I mean, I should have come to that, 20 or 30 years ago, but I guess better late than never. But as far as challenges, two things come to mind. One is the fact that in PR, there's really no guarantees. I mean, there's some publicists when they're meeting with the prospect and they say, I'll guarantee I'll get you on the Fox Business Channel. Guarantee I'll get on Oprah. It's like, I hate to tell you this, but pretty much, if not literally, they are lying to you because, executive producers are in charge of these shows. Some of them may, have a relative who does what you do. It's like they're always going to focus on, the relative, or it's just there's no guarantee. And I'm sure that when I first went into PR 15 years ago, I was very good at painting a rosy picture. This is going to be great. Everyone will love this. And once in a while, I come across a project that I still really feel that way, but I'm careful, to say, well, there are no guarantees here. We're going to cast a wide net. We're going to reach out to media outlets that are a good fit for this particular kind of story, and then we'll see how it goes. We'll adjust our strategy as we move along. I'm sure social media is, the same way in that regard. And then I guess the other big challenge, and I wouldn't really say it's a burden, but I see it as a responsibility, but also an opportunity, is that people who come to me, because I love working with individuals, authors and speakers and experts, are sometimes very needy. They're looking for the validation. Somebody writes a book like, I want to share this book with the world. I want to help the world, but I also want them to notice, wow, they're really good at what they do. This is a great book. And so we all, just like we all have a natural desire to share our message, I think we all want that stamp of approval, like, that's great, you're great. And we don't always get that. Of course, you can't please all the people all the time. That took me a little while to learn that one. But often my clients are saying, does this mean no one likes us? Does this mean no one wants our story? And what's wrong with it? It's like, no, it's a process. And, and part of the challenge, and again, I guess this, maybe you find this in social media also, is you really need to engage their attention in a really succinct, quick way. You don't have half an hour to tell them all about your life story. If you did, and if they really were going to put everything down and said, I'll give you half an hour, no matter what, I don't care if I feel like, hey, this is really boring, I wish I'd never promised half an hour. You really need to engage them succinctly and quickly, and then take them step by step, along the path. Like this, I'm so glad I first had an interest in this, and like I'm learning from this. This is a really great use of my time. A great, time. Time is really the most valuable thing we have. I mean, that's an old cliche, obviously, but if someone is going to, can you engage someone's attention and then get them to give you their time? You'd better give them a very good reward for that time, and so on. And Lorraine, as you know, as we record this, I'm actually in the middle of my very first online course that I've ever launched, Do-It-Yourself Public Relations for Authors. We have a small number of people in the group. I don't mind that it's not 100 people. We have 5 students who are all awesome people. And so I feel that, I need to really reassure them, like, your story does matter. People will benefit from hearing what you really want to share in this book that you're writing. I mean, sometimes I can't think of an example, to be honest with you, but I suppose at one point or another I found like, well, someone wants to talk about this topic or write about this topic, and I don't really know that a heck of a lot of people really care about that. It's going to be an uphill battle, but still the fact that they're passionate about it, or that, they're a fellow human being, it's like, wow, what an unusual interest he or she has. And I never would have considered, collecting whatever, So anyway, sorry to ramble on.
No, but I can see a lot of examples in that. I think 2 things that I get out of this is that, first of all, with being a business owner, you had mentioned right? Shiny objects. And I think we all tend to, I've been, doing social media marketing for a very long time now. And I realize that every once in a while I'll go over here and I'll start doing this, and I can do it, but it's not what I'm supposed to be doing. And so there's got to be ways, I try, because I could go chasing a squirrel today, if I wanted to, if I was a dog. But
exactly.
But I'm not a dog. But the bottom line is that it's funny. I started, and I wasn't a list person. I used to hate those people that my calendar says I can't go somewhere today because of this, and on my list I have to do this at 3:30. But I started doing that. And I block time. I use a high performance calendar. And to be honest with you, is if I stay within those time frames, it actually gives me more freedom. And I'm sure you'll agree with that, is that when you say that you're going to work on a project from 2 to 4 and you actually work on it and maybe you get finished, you're like, oh my gosh, I can go for my walk tonight on the beach, or I can, have dinner with my wife, or whatever it is that you like to do. I find that if we stay away from the big distractions that are going to, bring us down the road that we've wasted 3 days or so on this distraction, I feel that we're going to be on target. As a business owner, you really do have to have a little bit of discipline. That's number one that I gather. The other one is, we all have this, is like, I can't promise just because you post something on social media that you're going to get a client. I remember my very first customer, and I learned very quick that what my expectations were and what their expectations were very different. And so what I learned is I do a whole onboarding process now where I educate. And I think
they probably gave you at least 24 hours to get a client, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's important, because I think if you educate them, look, I'm going to be making people aware that you are there. Everybody's going to know that you're there. As many people as we can, get in contact, either through advertisement or organic reach. But I can't promise that just because we're on social media and I post it, they will come. And that's the same thing with PR. PR works hand in hand with social media, because to get on some of these big things, you do have to have some kind of presence. And, if you're a little guy, it's harder, yes, but don't let that deter you from following your dreams. But just know that we have to work extra hard, and we have to find places where we can get you a good target audience, that it's not going to require you to have 600,000 followers, because not everybody has 600,000 followers. And so that's one thing. The other thing I was just thinking about is I want to switch gears here a little bit, because not only do you do PR well, you connect others very well, but you do understand social media. A lot of people I work with don't understand social media. And so I want to ask you a few questions about social media, just because I think it will help. And the first question I want to ask you, so just our audience knows, what platforms, as a business owner and a PR person, are you most active on? I mean, what are the ones that you tend to hang out on the most?
Well, I would say that Facebook is number one and LinkedIn is number two. I know a lot of people are, beginning to knock Facebook a little bit in recent years, but I started with it, in the beginning, was that 12, 13 years ago. And, I guess I am part of an older demographic. And so the older demographic has stuck with, I haven't posted anything on TikTok or Snapchat or anything like that, But so I'm on Facebook, and I like the fact that, we can set up private groups on Facebook. Lorraine, it's funny. Today is the very last day for 3 years. I've been running a Zoom mastermind group, and tonight is our last, at the time we're recording this, our last meeting. And just because I'm choosing to use my time, precious time, in different ways, but it's been really great to have a private group on Facebook. So even if hey, only 10 people see what I post on Facebook, yeah, that's true. And, something, when you're trying to reach a large audience, that's worth thinking about. But So on Facebook, I guess it's continuing relationships that I've built up over time. It might not be the best, I might not be connecting with 100 brand new friends every day, so that's something to think about. Oh, there's my friend now. The dog's coming in the room. But, and also LinkedIn. I mean, I love how you've been instructing people on LinkedIn, and, that's a great example of how you can be methodical and structured. And, when you were talking about accomplishing tasks or people who have lists, as you know, I have a lot of friends who are life coaches and whatnot. And so from them and from, really accomplished speakers and life coaches, I've learned the value of like reverse engineering. Where do I started writing a book years ago. I still haven't finished it. I shifted gears about a year ago. Said, hey, I really want to create an online course. But I said, well, how do I reverse engineer that? What do I need step by step by step and to make it really happen? And so I'm, like I said, I'm learning the value of processes and systems and all that, later in life, as it were. But reverse engineering is a great way to go too.
Yeah, and it's always exciting. You said that a couple of times later in life. Well, but you know what? It is never too late to learn. I think when you stop learning, you're really missing a big part of life. I think that even if you're in your 80s or 90s, you can be learning. Exactly. So I give kudos to always changing and being willing to change, because that's the whole problem. Really, is where you get stuck maybe in business, is that you think that this model is the model that you're supposed to be doing. And, the only way you're going to know if that model is the right way is if you do it, and you may fail, but that's okay, because then you know that that's not the right way and you can move on to a different model. Mm-hmm. So definitely. Yeah. I've seen you on Facebook, your group. One thing I wanted to say to my audience out there is that if you hear what Tom said that, he had a little group, and, these are some of the people that he's connected with on Facebook are people that he's known for years, and he wanted to continue to nurture that relationship. And that's the key, because a lot of people miss that whole nurturing of a relationship. And so a lot of people do not use social media the way Tom does. Tom actually does it the right way, because nobody's going to do business with you if you're constantly asking them to buy you're asking them to buy your garbage. Because why should I buy your garbage? I want to know you first. Is your garbage going to help me? I hate to use the word garbage, but there's some stuff that people have tried to sell me that, no, I do not need it. But he does it the right way. And that's why I wanted to ask him. And plus I've known him even to be guest speakers and do some things with another colleague of ours, that he talked about social media. So he knows social media. I do have to ask you one question, because I'm dying to know, and maybe some other people are dying to know, but you've spent a significant amount of time on Clubhouse, and you didn't mention it. So I asked you what platforms. You said Facebook, LinkedIn, and you didn't mention Clubhouse. So I'm just curious, is there something behind that? Do you think that Clubhouse is valuable? Have you been able to nurture relationships on Clubhouse? What's your thoughts on it? Or is the jury still out on Clubhouse?
How much time do I have to answer that question?
You've got no more than 5 minutes. Don't go over, but yeah, just,
okay. So, I was very excited when I first heard about Clubhouse, say, back in January or February, I guess it was. And, I heard about it from our friend, Chris Salem, who you know. And I thought to my first thoughts, he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm late for our call. I was on Clubhouse last night until 3 a.m. It's like, oh, this sounds very dangerous for me. I'm a bright, shiny objects person. This is like kryptonite for me, but I love conversation. And so I'm intrigued by it at the same time. And at that time, I happened to be part of I'm a member of many different groups. My wife, Joanne, says, Tom, you're a member of so many support groups. It's like, I'm actually not a member of AA or anything. I enjoy a good glass of wine, but it's like, she thinks our friend Matt Byers' support group is my best support group, actually, again, organizing myself, But I was a member of a support group of people building online courses. And one of my friends in the group, this lady Juanita from Australia, she's a TEDx coach there in Queensland, Australia, and she jumped into Clubhouse and started using it in what I thought was a very impressive way. She scheduled like 2 different topics, weekly shows. One was about, she called it your 5-step introduction, like how do you give a great elevator pitch? And she would spend the first part of the hour teaching, and then she'd have people up on the hot seat, one after another. And I, listened in and, was joined her there for a number of weeks in a row just to be supportive. And I noticed people were coming back. And they were saying, "Here, do you think I've improved over this past week?" And she would also tell them, "Well, I've created an infographic that lays out the 5 steps. And if you'd like to give me your email address, I can arrange to send you the infographic that might help you." And she developed a following of like 1,000 or 2,000 people just on Clubhouse. And she said a lot of people contacted her offline saying, "Hey, Juanita, you're so amazing. Can I hire you as my private coach?" And that was great. So I thought she was using it in a very effective way. Again, I don't mean to knock our buddy Chris. I recently withdrew from this 4-person speaker education group I'd been participating here online. We're all in Connecticut, but it was all online. And I just thought, I know life is not all about making money, but I really was taking a harder look at how do I spend the hours in the day? Because I don't like to disappoint my PR clients. Like, I could spend 24 hours a day on just one client, same client, day after day after day. They would love that. But I have to make decisions every day. Like you said, there's no one standing over me saying, do this, don't do that, But our speaker-themed Clubhouse room, it was great for conversations. But I, to be perfectly honest, felt like it wasn't really leading anywhere. We weren't signing any people up to our, more participatory group and stuff like that. And a lot of people will ping me, "Tom, you got to drop what you're doing and just join me on this Clubhouse room." So I actually haven't been in a couple of weeks, but I may go back to it. It's, I have one client now, a husband and wife team, who talk about chronic digestive disorders, and they have like a coaching program and online subscription on there through their website and so on. And when I spoke to them a couple of weeks ago, I said Clubhouse could be really good for you because, like my friend Juanita with "Let me learn how to give my elevator pitch." Like, they keep coming back, coach me, free of charge. I learn a lot. I listen to the other people in the hot seat. I think that's a really good framework. So for a lot of people, and probably for me in PR, it's a very good framework and it's a good way to use Clubhouse. But I just have a number of other things I'm focusing on right now, so I'm not doing that.
Yeah, no, very wise. I started spending a lot of time on Clubhouse too, and I was just thinking, I have all these other channels that I'm doing really well at. And, I'm the old adage is if it's not broken, it doesn't need to be fixed. Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking, it's like, the bandwidth can only go so far, mm-hmm. And we all have a certain amount. I see the value, I see the value of all social media to get awareness out, to start nurturing relationships. So wherever people choose to spend their time, just make sure where you're spending your time is your target audience is there. Because if I'm going on a group to a bunch of chefs, it's pretty likely that I'm not going to get a client out of that. Mm-hmm. Not that the goal is always to get a client, but you do want to be, making sure that you are, that at least you're talking to the audience that you have a potential of getting a client.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you're right about, is that, who's your, as they say, in all my online coaching tutorial programs, like, who's your ideal customer avatar? My ideal customer avatar is this age and blah, blah, blah. It's like, are they really in that community? And so I certainly agree with you, and I'm learning the value of that. I will say that when I've been promoting a couple of free teleclasses that led to, the intention was to teach people, they could walk away having learned something. That was perfectly fine. I wasn't going to twist their arm to, sign up and pay for my course, but I was going to tell them about my course, that it's available to them. And so it was an interesting experience, because just like when I launched a weekly newsletter, e-newsletter several years ago, it was interesting how some of my loved ones and closest friends, don't have time for you to even look at what I'm putting out there. Or it's like, what's the matter? You're not, that's the same neediness that my PR client, it's like, what, don't they like me? What's going on? But at the same time, I found so many new people like, wow, that really resonates with me. So it feels good to put it out there because it's kind of fun to connect with brand new people. It's like, wow, that person really appreciates what I'm interested in, you know?
Yeah. You know, again, I just wanted to say, I think, you know, you're doing a great job. Again, to all my audience out there is if you're thinking of starting a business, I wanted you to get some value out of this because here you have a very successful business owner. And also he had a very successful career. Tongue twisters there. But what I want to say is that, Tom, you mentioned, and I wanted to ask you this question. You mentioned that, you know, you just started your course and you have 5 members of it. And my question to you is this, are you going to relaunch this course again? Or how are you?
Absolutely. This is the first time. It's funny. I've learned from so many great coaches, you know, really over the past year. You know, it's just like I've learned so much about LinkedIn from you, Lorraine, and so many other things in recent years. But, you know, I signed up for Amy Porterfield's program about how to create an online course. And then I participate in a mastermind group led by Tony Robbins' son, Jarek, who's really a brilliant young man. And so in that group met a lady named Michelle Soro, who's a TEDx speaker and coach and so on. And she teaches, you know, how to do great Zoom video sales and whatnot. And so I participated in her program, and that really got me on the right path to launch my course. And as Amy Porterfield was telling me, as Michelle Soro was telling me, and then she introduced me to it, or turned me on to a new guy I'd never heard of, James Wedmore. And I was just listening to one of his presentations, you know, his free teleclass. And he was saying, we all learn a lot from jumping in. We used to think everything needs to be perfect before we launch. It's perfect, launch. He's like, no, you learn from jumping into it. And so, you know, I happen to be the first person in this Michelle's group of 12. Like, okay, these are the dates. You say do our free teleclasses on those dates. I'm going to do it. I'll do it no matter what. You say launch on this date, 6 sessions. I'll do it no matter what. And because, as you can probably tell, I overthink so many things. It's like, I'm just going to do it. And so I've been learning a lot. And so I don't know at what point people might be listening to this conversation, but I'm going to be launching my course, I think, right after Labor Day. So early September, a 6-week program. And so people are welcome to contact me if they want to learn more about it. But, you know, my students this go round seem very happy, and I'm really supporting them 100%. And we'll continue to support them as they, you know, begin their journey to connect with the public. And so everything I'm learning from this experience, I'm going to roll into what we're starting in September, you know.
Awesome. And it's always better the second time around. And I'm sure it's really great now too, but I learned so many things from when I launched my first course. And, you know, you make little course corrections things like maybe having a syllabus after, you know, or whatever or an outline or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. Just going the extra mile and doing the extra things in your course. And as you release it, each time you release it, it gets better and better. And so what I'm going to do, Tom, is I'm just going to, you know, whenever I do a podcast, I always put some summary stuff in, you know, the description and below every post I make. And I will make sure that if you're interested in, and I highly recommend it. Tom is such a good teacher too. He makes everything so easy for you to understand. I've been to several of his little classes at the library, and I really enjoy them. And I always take away something. So I'd highly recommend if PR is something you want to do it yourself, then definitely take his course. I'll put his email address in so you can get in contact with him. And then also, if you're writing a book or you have a book and you don't know how you're going to market it, I highly recommend Tom for the job, because I can't imagine anybody else that would be able to do that as good as he can.
Thank you.
And so again, I want to thank you for being on my podcast.
Yeah, this was fun. Loved it.
And to all of you out there, if you have any questions for me or Tom, again, Tom's email I'll put in below, and my email is Lorraine@bizgonsocial.com, and I can always get you in touch with Tom too. So for now, bye, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Biz Gone Social podcast. Find us on Instagram at Biz Gone Social for extra tips. Check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, stay social.